Hi, Essi, how are you?
Hi, Guy. I'm very well, thanks.
Good, good, good. I'm quite excited today because we've got you here. We're going to be tasting through three great champagnes, I'm sure, and you are one of the few people who is at the top of their game and specialist in champagne too. And I thought a great way to start the tasting would be to get a bit of a background on yourself and how you became a champagne expert.
Right. Yes. So I'm based in Finland, and I've been working in the wine industry for my entire working career, even if I had a business study background. I was a wine buyer actually first, and felt like I needed to increase my knowledge in champagne. So I then went to pursue the Master of Wine, which I got in 2006, so already way back now. And that was actually the time when I decided to specialize on champagnes, because I felt like the more I knew, the more I studied, the more humble I became about my knowledge and understanding. So I wanted to choose a particular region, an area where I one day could feel like I'm a specialist, and chose Champagne just because for me it's the best wine in the world. But yes, today I do all sorts of things around Champagne. I've been writing quite a few books. The biggest job for me is every 6 years to do the Christie's World Encyclopedia of Champagne and Sparkling Wine together with Tom Stevenson. And then also I judged together with Tom at the Champagne and Sparkling Wine World Championships. And for example, in Finland, I organized a big event called Grand Champagne. But all things bubbly, really. Champagne foremost, but all the sparkling wines of the world as well.
How important do you think the events are that you just mentioned? So the Champagne and Sparkling Wine World Championships, for example.
Yeah, I think, I mean, there are a lot of competitions in wine, and I don't want to judge in too many of them, because really for me the quality of the competition is really all about the quality of its judges, and it's especially when we come to a very specialist style like the sparkling. And often, you know, the good still wine judges might not be the best sparkling wine judges, because you are really looking into a different style and quality parameters. But I think definitely they are very important. And I also like the World Championships, because we are able to attract the best sparkling wines of the world. So there we can really compare the best against the best, and that makes it really interesting. And I think also the results are very worthwhile.
What would you say makes champagne and sparkling wines such an in-depth topic for those who wouldn't understand?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating world. It's so different from the rest of the wines. You know, if you think of the world of wine, the winemakers, very seldom it is the still winemakers that would make also the best sparkling wines. You really have to be a specialist in the field. It's really all about you know, the base wine style, what you do in the vineyards, what is the balance you're looking for in the grapes. So it really begins already very differently. And then of course sparkling wine is a very delicate wine, and it's a very it has a lot of finesse, and also it's a very energetic wine. So I think style-wise, it's quite different, and maybe appealing to different people.
And the focus for many years has been on champagne, that is the region, that is the sparkling wine. Now it's very different, because sparkling wines are made throughout the world in many, many different countries, almost every country. How have you seen that change over your time?
Yeah, I think it's wonderful now to try to follow all the evolution, because it's really happening very quickly now. Many of the new world markets start to be in that sort of mature situation, that they're actually starting to look seriously into sparkling wine. Of course, often the very first great sparkling wine projects in each country have been done by the Champenois. Because they are, you know, you can do the good result much quicker in a new area. But also, you know, champagne consultants, for example, can make great results very quickly. So today I've been really eagerly following, for example, the progress they are doing now in Eastern Europe, say Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria. Each of them have one or two really world-class sparkling wine producers already. And of course, Italy is another amazing market for sparkling wine, traditional method sparkling wine from north, even all the way to Campania and even Sicily.
Has it surprised you at how a lot of the New World wine regions, the sparkling wines that they're making, the quality of them?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I was maybe when I really started to look into them for the first time, I was really positively surprised by the wines of California, because in my mind, I had a very warm area impression to me. But when you are in the right spots, say in Carneros or in Anderson Valley or Santa Cruz Mountains, you can actually find very cool spots for making very exciting sparkling wines there. So yeah, it's surprising. And when Mérite Chandon ventured into China and India, already there, first releases were of fabulous quality level. So when you know what you're doing, you can actually make great sparkling wine in very, very different terroirs.
Well, I think that's the great way to start our tasting, Essi. Why don't you introduce the first champagne?
Yes, so we're going to taste 3 wines today, 3 wines that I very much like, that are come from very different producers and are stylistically also quite different. The first one comes from a producer people know very well, probably. So Louis Roederer, one of the most highly regarded domains of Champagne, and one of the organic and biodynamic pioneers. So the house has now some 120 hectares out of their 240 cultivated and certified organically, with the aim of getting them all organically farmed, which is of course quite extraordinary in Champagne. But also the Roederer house style, it's one that really pleases my palate a lot, because it's one for purity, for brightness of fruit, for vibrancy. It's really a terroir wine style where there's sort of nothing masking the flavor of the terroir. One thing that they stylistically are also known for is the very high acidity in the Roederer wines. So they often they leave the malolactic fermentation undone. So the wines have really exuberant, bright fruitiness, but a lot of acidity. And that's why traditionally many of their non-vintages and the vintage have been quite high in dosage. And that's where this sort of the story of this wine started. So it's called Stark Brut Nature. So it's started from the friendship of the French designer Philippe Starck and the owner family of Roederer, Frédéric Rousseau. And Philippe Starck, he's sort of in his mentalities, he's a very, a person for sustainability, for organic biodynamics and so forth. And he was really was asking for Roederer to produce something, dry and more towards that sort of natural wine genre. And then I think the cellar master Jean-Baptiste Lecaillon took it as a positive challenge and went on to create this wine, which was first made in the vintage 2006. So how he tackled the problem with such a high acidity to go for a completely undosed, completely bone-dry champagne was to only produce it from the so-called continental years. So this would be the warm and dry years of Champagne.
Okay.
And he went for a very particular location. So they have a grouping of 3 vineyards in Cumières in the Valle de la Marne next to each other. And these have been for long cultivated biodynamically, and they are on this clay soil. So if you have a warm, dry year, the clay soil is a particularly dry and warm soil. And then you have the southern aspect of the vineyard, so the grapes really ripen perfectly to be able to make such a wine that is able to shine without the dosage whatsoever. So, did you already smell the champagne?
Good.
So this is a 2015. So from the nose, it has some smoky, toasty layers from the aging, but it's quite generous. You have a lot of sort of ripe orchard fruit, apricots, apple, and so forth. Both
It's quite developed
red,
though, isn't it?
yeah.
Sorry, thinking about what you were talking earlier with the dosage and everything. So sorry, carry on.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No. Let me have a taste. So really on the palate, it's quite wide and quite rich, but then you have a lot of acidity. But the feeling, overall feeling, is rather sweet and rich and very energetic due to the acidity and the sort of energetic bubbles on the wine. So what's particular about this wine is that it's sort of a little bit like a rewinding to the old days of champagne. So instead of doing the normal blending in the cellar, what we do in Champagne in the spring after the harvest, you combine the different batches of base wines together in the way you like. But this one actually is born, the blend is born in the vineyard, so it's a so-called field blend. So on a certain biodynamically favorable day, all the growers of Roederer are sent on that one day to the vineyards in Cumières, and they pick everything in one go. Okay. And all of the varieties, those plots, they have majority of Chardonnay and a lot of Pinot Noir, but a little bit of Meunier as well. And they get all picked at one time. So it's, sometimes, not all the varieties ripen at the same time, but the idea with this wine is that you nevertheless pick them and try to put in every batch of pressing, all the different grape varieties. So the wine is sort of very much born in the vineyard.
Do you know why they choose? Sorry, so do you know why they choose to do that then, instead of separating out some of the vineyard in different parcels and plots for different ripening? Why they make that decision to just go in and pick in one go?
Yeah, I think it's the idea is to look into the old way of making champagne, looking into the sort of field blend mentality. And also recently Roederer planted all the champagne varieties on this plot. So in addition to Chardonnay, Pinot Noir and Meunier, in the future this wine will also have a bit of Arban, a bit of Petit Melier, a bit of Pinot Blanc and a bit of Pinot Gris. So that's also part of the sort of soul of this wine, that it has those historical varieties included in the field blend. So I love this. I love the wine as such, but I really like the philosophy behind it as well.
That's what I was thinking, and that's going to be quite a blend if they choose to go forward with that, because that's a number of different varieties. It's got a wonderful nose on it. That's what I keep coming back to.
Yeah, lovely. This sort of toasted bread, a bit of smoky, a bit of waxy fruit as well. Something vegetable, a bit like a greener herbaceous flavors.
And then a nice mouthfeel and a wonderful like zip of acidity. I always love that in champagne and sparkling wines when it's there, because I think it's one of the key defining points to a wine like this, is to have that character, that edge. And
to me, I like that it's quite rich and wide and fleshy when you put it in your mouth, but then after swallowing it, you can feel that salinity in the wine. It actually finishes extremely dry if you feel it, but your palate feels very fresh and invigorated and sort of ready for the next sip. It almost claims for the next taste. So that's, to me, often a sign of a good wine, that you immediately want to taste it again.
Oh, absolutely. You want a wine to be moreish. I think that's the whole point.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, and one winemaking wise, so just a little a part of the wine, there's like about a fourth of the wines that have been fermented in large oak casks. So when you smell or taste the wine, you can't really sense oak, but there is some effect, maybe to open the wines a little bit and bring an additional layer of complexity to it.
And as you say, that's to give it a bit more depth, a bit more dimension, and to add layers to the wine.
Yeah. Lovely. So yes, so far this is the fourth vintage of it. We've had 06, 09, 12, and 15. So this is quite recently released.
Is that coincidental that it's every 3 years, or is that intentional? Because I
coincidental,
right.
Because it's the nature that decides this has to be this sort of warm and dry year.
Well, that's what I was thinking. It's very climate dependent. Okay.
Probably it was made in 18 as well, so next one will come in probably 3 years' time.
I see. Great. So let's move on to the next champagne.
Yes. So next, I'd like us to taste the Palmer Blanc de Blanc, which we have in a Magnum.
So Essi, I think with this wine, it would be helpful if you could explain a little bit about the importance of magnums and also
yes.
why this champagne is in a Magnum too.
Yes, I certainly will do that. Yes, I'll do it when we taste because it's easier for me to explain how the Magnum tastes different and why. But yes, first of all, why I chose this wine is because I think it's absolutely fabulous wine and one of the best purchases in Champagne. We actually awarded this in last year's Champagne and Sparkling Wine World Championships, this very wine what we are tasting right now. So it was our world champion Blanc de Blanc. So that means that it was the best Blanc de Blanc in the competition against, Champagne and everywhere else. So it got a major trophy.
Oh, great. What a treat. Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully you like it. There is no vintage on the label, but it comes from one vintage only. So if you have your cork still left with you can check the vintage from the cork. It's written on the cork. Do you still have it there, or you already got rid of your cork?
No, I do have the corks here somewhere, just not to hand.
Yeah, because I checked mine and it's a 2013, which was the one that won exactly in last year's competition, and that's what I tried to arrange for you as well. Yes, so this used to be a vintage wine. It's a Palmer classic, but now in how they like to position their range of champagnes, they've decided to label this as non-vintage, which sort of makes it a bargain for the consumer because it's priced like a non-vintage, even if quality-wise it is like a vintage.
Right.
And also one of the things, Palmer, it is a cooperative. That's why I also wanted to show it because the cooperative brands are really making a real breakthrough in Champagne. And sometimes in certain regions, cooperatives didn't have such great reputation. But definitely Champagne has some wonderful cooperatives, and Palmer definitely is one of the stars because it's approximately 200 growers have magnificent ownership of vineyards, especially on the Montagne de Reims, so in the main Pinot Noir region, but then also Cézanne and the Côte de Bar. So because they are, majority of their business is still selling the grapes or the wines to the champagne houses. Their own brand is increasing in importance, but they really can afford to do everything perfectly with their own wines. Their slogan actually is that Palmer has time, and that means that they age their wines particularly long in the cellar. So for every vintage of this Blanc de Blanc, the normal bottle age is for a minimum of 5 years, which is a really long time for a non-vintage Blanc de Blanc in Champagne. But these Magnums, they really like to give a long time, so they can be aged as long as 10 years. Okay. So for example, So, for example, this Magnum, what we are having, it's the current release, meaning that it has basically been 9 years on the lease, which really accounts for that amazing complexity and sort of aged mellowness the wine comes with.
You can definitely taste that. It's got a wonderful soft mouthfeel to it, but still retaining some great fruit.
Yeah, and it's an unusual Blanc de Blanc because, you know, most of Champagne's Blanc de Blancs, they would come from the Côte de Blanc, which is the famous Chardonnay region, almost exclusively planted with Chardonnay. But you have these other Chardonnay spots in different areas in Champagne. So you have especially 2 villages on the Montagne de Reims, Trepaille and Villers-Marmaris, that are known for their a bit richer, a bit more tropical, spicier Chardonnay, and also the Cézanne, which is on the southern side of the Côte de Blanc. So it really has a bit more softer and more generous expression of Chardonnay. So this wine comes exclusively from those 2 parts of Champagne. So it's very different from the razor sharp, acidic, driven, linear Chardonnay. So much more richness to it. But let me have a sniff and taste.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, lovely, super sweet nose. It has some tropical, like exotic fruit, a bit of caramelized pineapple. Definitely vanilla, like a bit of aromatic wood, like juniper wood. Very, very pure and clean in its aromas. Lovely sort of yeast enriched complexity. Very soft and sort of welcoming. It's a very friendly nose. You immediately know it's going to be, you know, very, very kind and caressing to you. And yes, on the palate, it's a beautiful combination of a lot of very silky texture. There's good volume. It's very sort of flowing, silky on the palate, but then you have that amazing acidity, really bringing a lot of freshness and a lot of length to this wine. For me, it's a really long and complete and seamless wine.
I was going to say that actually, it's one of the first things I got. I mean, again, a great mouth, a beautiful coating of the tongue, but the finish, it's just there and it's going and very pleasing too.
Yeah, it's absolutely charming, and you know, when you look at the price tag of this wine, you'll be surprised. It is absolutely a great purchase. So going to the Magnum effect in Champagne. So of course, Magnums for all the wines are greater choice, especially if you intend to age them. But for Champagne, it's even more important because the wine goes through its second fermentation in the bottle. So if you look at the size of the neck of this bottle and you compare it to the size of a normal or the 75 centiliter bottle, they're actually identical. So that actually means that that you have twice more headspace, oxygen in the small bottle compared to the volume inside than you have in the Magnum. So Magnums therefore are super reductive. And when you try to, you know, have the wine go through the second fermentation in bottle, it already struggles and it takes months already in a small bottle. But when you're talking about Magnums, it really struggles. So it takes a longer time, and you know, at the end, it's not the same wine anymore. So what we have is that it's an ugly word, but you know, the Magnum really helps you get away from all the oxidative characters of the wine, and the wine really verges beautifully to the reductive side, meaning that you have these sort of gunpowdery fireworks, smoky aromatics. There's always much more finesse. The aromas are very tightly knit. They're not so obvious as they are in a 75 centiliter bottle. And then I always find that also the mousse is so much more creamier, and the bubbles are smaller in a Magnum. So I always, even for a young wine, I always prefer to go for the magnums whenever possible. Because often for a normal champagne, the price difference might be 10% off, 20% extra compared to two normal bottles. But quality-wise, because I really love this style, you get much more. But especially if you want to age it, the wine ages really much slower and much finer in a magnum, and that has really everything got to do with the headspace in the wine and the size of the neck because of the oxygen ingress, because of the same size of the neck. So it's actually magnums oxidize twice slower than the bottles. So for long aging, they really are a must.
Well, Essi, thank you. I mean, what a treat to try that wine, particularly how well it's done in the awards this year.